Hello, everyone. We are just a couple minutes from starting. We're making sure that all our panelists are here, but we will get started in just a few seconds. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second panel. We're waiting just a couple seconds for our panelists to all join in, but I will introduce myself. My name is Michael Broderick. I use he, him pronouns, and I am an able, cisgender, heterosexual white male. For our non-visual audience, I have a standardized blue and yellow DIM conference background highlighting our logo, and I'm wearing a blue suit and white shirt. I'm an M4, and I'm the co-director of programming for our Diversity in Medicine conference, and I'm hoping to start a plastic surgery residency next year. Being involved since our inaugural conference 3 years ago, I'm elated with how many individuals are listening in and engaging with our virtual platform. So thank you all. To all our prior and future speakers, I'm always wholeheartedly thankful for each of you, and I'm able to listen and learn from each of you in many, many ways. So I'm excited for this next panel. I wanted to welcome you to the second panel because while our first was addressing how to talk about diversity and inclusion within the hospital, our second tries to highlight how we can talk about it and advocate for initiatives outside of the hospital. We all have busy lives. We all have our own responsibilities and employees of various companies. And it's often hard to make sure that we dedicate time to the things that we are passionate about. And so this panel is about how we can use our own platform, our own perspectives, to advocate for patients and the general public in terms of public health and the other issues that are plaguing our society today. For the panelists and for all those listening, if you could continue to state your name before talking each time so that our viewers that are using the CART system can identify who's speaking, that would be amazing. And also, if each of you could just take a second to introduce yourselves in whatever way you see fit, but also touching on your advocacy highlights. How about Dr. Brown, if you could go first?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Italo Brown. I am an emergency physician, assistant professor in emergency medicine at Stanford, and I am also the chief impact officer of TRAP Medicine, which is a barbershop-based intervention where we try to increase the health literacy of Black men and boys. So we use a lot of different advocacy efforts, and I just am so happy to be with you all today.
Dr. Shapiro.
Nice to meet you, everybody. I'm a pediatrician, also the medical director for health education and wellness. He, him, his, wearing a green shirt, white background right now. You will notice the accent. I come from a small city called Mexico City. Have been very involved with community efforts with underserved communities in Chicago, Florida rural area, and actually migrant workers. And right now working in LA County and Orange County to make sure that everybody has the information needed to take charge and translate medical to a language that they can actually do something actionable with. Then it's a pleasure to be with you.
Dr. Montiel?
Hello, everybody. My name is Gloria Montiel. I'm not that kind of doctor, but I'm a PhD and a researcher, and I'm one of Ultimate Health Services leaders around the civic engagement program. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a Latina, undocumented, currently under the DACA program, and a lot of my advocacy has been around immigration and immigrant health. So yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Nnodim Opara?
Good morning. My name is Dr. Ijeoma Nnodim Opara. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm so excited to be here this morning. I am wearing a, now I don't even know how you begin to describe this for folks, but just know that it's gorgeous, multicolored African print shirt, and the same for my head wrap. I'm sitting against a gray couch with a yellow background and plants on the left. And on top of me is a multicolored picture. My little history, I guess I would say positionality, is that I am a Black, Nigerian, Igbo American woman physician. I am cisgendered, heterosexual with invisible disabilities, and I'm MedPeds trained. In terms of my advocacy, I start a lot of initiatives, 3 of which is health equity and justice in medicine, healing between the lines, and global and urban health equity. And these are curricula that I founded and direct, and one of which I co-founded that is applicable at Wayne State University and throughout Detroit, Michigan. And finally, I would say that my area as a physician, scholar, activist is really disrupting and dismantling structural racism, especially in medicine, and particularly race-based medicine. And finally, if you don't remember anything about me, remember that I am a recovering perfectionist and I am a professional whyologist. Nice to meet y'all.
Thank you all to all our panelists for introducing themselves. I think all of you touched very well on some aspects of the first panel, specifically perfectionism and how that's led us to medicine, but also just our advocacy and how important that is to each of us. I was hoping that each of you could talk about what influenced you to originally get into advocacy to begin with. I know sometimes our identities or our backgrounds do so, but I think it's important for our audience to understand why each of us is passionate about the topics we've chosen to get involved with. Dr. Brown, if you'd like to start.
Sorry, I'm making sure that I'm here again. Sorry. Dr. Brown, he, him, his. I didn't say it originally, but I am African-American male. I have a blue shirt. I identify as he, him, his, and my background is the diversity in medicine backdrop. So I got into advocacy probably around the time I was at Morehouse College. I started first just being involved in what I would consider to be legislation, like trying to go to different legislative meetings and seeing what that was about, what the process was in terms of how policy was passed and understanding how policies can be inequitable. So that started in terms of public health. And I went into public health because of seeing the like constantly disproportionately disadvantaged communities of color. I think that it was around the time like 2010, 2011, where I really started to understand that to be a provider, I'd have to know how to advocate for my patients. I'd have to know how to advocate for communities, because very rarely are there people who look like them inside those spaces. And it's this miraculous song and dance that occurs between people who understand and can speak that language and those who don't get disenfranchised like chronically by it. So I wanted to learn the technical tools to speak that language and then be the person who can advocate and then translate that information across a variety of different communities. So just like someone can sit there and tell someone, you know, the ins and outs of a sporting event or the ins and outs of a food, a certain particular type of cuisine, I wanted to be that type of tool for my community when it came to like talking about, you know, why this community is starting to get gentrified or why this community doesn't have access to healthy foods. And then at the patient level, being able to tell them like, you know, you can ask for certain monies to be allocated to your retirement or for health issues or for them to come in and do certain training. Like those conversations didn't happen commonly. And I noticed that the best platform for me to do it was in barbershops. So around 2014, a buddy of mine started Trap Medicine. He brought me on as his advisor. And ever since then, we've just been having these, what I would consider unconventional conversations in barbershops in different locations across the US. Started out in Oakland, California. I'm from Sacramento, California. And I just remember seeing their faces light up when you're having these conversations and bringing material that is what I would consider to be high level to them. And it's very granular, and they understand it, like, why would they, leave us out of this conversation? And you have to be the person to come back to that body and say, you're leaving out a large swath of people. And it's important that you listen and that you have representation in those spaces. So my advocacy journey just kind of stemmed from interest, being a part of like NAACP, being a part of different advocacy groups in college, and then downstream as a physician, realizing that people needed a voice and someone who looked like them, who wasn't afraid to go to bat.
Michael here again. Thank you for sharing, Dr. Brown. Whoever would like to go next? I don't want to keep going in the same order and get things dull.
I can step in. This is Ilan, and again, him, his, and for all of you. And I actually have an interesting background on the way that you get Ilan Shapiro from Mexico. My entire family was looking for the American dream probably like 200 years ago. And especially the last part, like 150 years ago, 100 years ago, and they moved from Europe, from Poland, Russia, and Lithuania. And without knowing Waze, Google, or anything else at those moments, they ended up in Mexico waiting for actually to come to the real America. And we stayed there. And I saw the struggles from foreigners coming to a new country, and the language barriers, and actually everything, and going with your grandma to the same thing that I was seeing replicated when I was actually going with my grandma and translating with different languages, and having that conversation from different languages to Spanish and back and forth. And I understood the importance of being there, and how a doctor, it's not just a doctor, but like the initial key. And when I came to the States, I had the pleasure to be the liaison between Mexico and the WHO. And when I saw what was happening in my little towns around Mexico City, and in the middle of the jungle in the south part of Mexico, and what was happening in Geneva, I saw the complete disconnection between the reality of where we're supposed to be going to the reality of how are we trying to do that part. And I work in Chicago, the real Chicago, the one that actually has Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, African Americans, and all the absolutely conflict of the world inside of a corner by corner. And it got to a point that I started seeing, the problems with, and it got to a point that I'm a pediatrician. I was doing trauma care to kids that are 14, 15. And that was not, like, oh, it happened, like he got a couple of bullet holes inside of them, like, oh, once a week, or he fell in a knife. No, it was like a daily basis in the hospital. That was my reality. Then I started seeing a lot of diverse backgrounds that we were not helping. I saw the pandemic in the H1N1, how that was actually my first pandemic, how it was actually hurting our communities. And our communities were hurting, not because the doctors were not there or we didn't have the vaccine. They were hurting because they were not having channels to get information, and there were a lot of fears. And right now, moved to Florida, where I was working with migrant communities that, didn't have running water, and that's U.S. soil. They have running water. They didn't have, sometimes electricity, and I was helping with the kids. And right now here in LA, and especially with this pandemic, one of the most important things that I have seen is that in order to be part of the conversation in the table, you need to be there. If not, you're the main dish. And we have seen this with underserved communities back and forth. And the problem is not just translating English to a different language, or it needs to be relevant, culturally appropriate, and most importantly, given by the trusted source of the information. And sometimes that's why I love, going, the concept of going to barbershops. We haven't found that magic key in the Hispano community, but for sure we want to, and the other thing that I'm very trustworthy with is that I think that when you unite all the colors and flavors, you can amplify the message. And we are missing that boat, especially right now with the pandemic, where, it's nice to have a Google translation from English to whatever, but if it doesn't hear well or it doesn't translate the words, and that's how you're missing the entire boat. And right now, this is the problem that we're going to have. We're going to have tons of vaccines out there, but our community will go like Dr. Shapiro, I just want to wait. Like, wait for what? You have been waiting for 13 months. You have like abuelitos and abuelitas that died. You have your partner that died. You have a lot of people around you that have been severely damaged by this disease, and you don't want, no, I just want to wait. And that part is when we are going to fail. And the problem is that if we don't see it right now and we don't understand that as a medical system, we just are there for 5, maybe 10% of their lives of the patient, or, and that's actually why we can actually help them. But the magic part of it is actually that 80-90% that happens on the streets, on their communities, on their schools, on the toxic stress, on the food that they eat. And that's where the magic starts. And that's, I think, where diversity and energy will start making the difference.
Michael here again, and I think that's so true. Dr. Montiel, I know you've done some work with the pandemic as well. I think that'd be a good flow to some of the work you've done with zip codes and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I became an advocate because out of necessity. I went through school and entered college at a time when even the word undocumented student wasn't really heard of. So I had to leverage my story in a very public way to bring attention not only to the personal struggles that I was facing, because I was very privileged. I actually got a chance to attend Harvard as both an undergrad and a graduate and get into the PhD. But for me, the celebration of that success didn't address the structural barriers that the majority of undocumented students face. And so I use my own personal advocacy on social media. I also grew up in the age of social media. And so that was a tool that I used to mobilize communities moving forward. What that also allowed me to do is really bring the issue of public health into my social media and into my network in a way that people were able to understand what they could individually do. Most recently in Orange County, the County of Orange wasn't publishing zip code data. So one of my mentors working at Latino Health Access, we gathered a group together and demanded that the county actually publish that zip code data, because that's what would allow us to be able to focus testing sites and then prepare for the vaccination. So we've been mobilizing a lot through social media. Latino Health Access has actually been coordinating the response. And another piece that I never really understood that could be a piece of advocacy was grant writing. My main functions in community has been as a senior grant writer for a long time. And that not only allows us to change the way we're perceiving our communities. For example, oftentimes grants or funders ask to describe the target population, but it's my opportunity as a grant writer to shift that language to talk about partner community and priority community instead of a target. And in that sense, bring uplift the voices of the community, but their status also as partners in bringing solutions. And then most recently, in terms of vaccine efforts, we're really going out there and doing that peer-to-peer communication as well. And now Ultimate Health Services, as one of the largest FQHCs in the country, has now been partnering with communities to bring additional access to the vaccine into communities rather than expecting communities to come to these large vaccination sites. Just one quick example, because I've been posting so much on my Instagram and really telling the story of how the pandemic has been impacting our communities, a couple of people who I'd never met before, but who had followed me for a while said, hey, we want to help you do outreach. What can we do? And so last night after work, I ended up meeting with them at one of the parks in Santa Ana, which is one of the most impacted cities here in Orange County. And we distributed flyers to the Orange County vaccine line. And we ended up signing up 2 people to receive their vaccine, elderly people too. So this is the power, right, of being able to tell a story, of being able to communicate with our own networks in a way that also mobilizes them to act and to be an advocates for our community as well. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity also.
And it sounds like you've made a large impact. I know all 3 of you are working on the West Coast. Dr. Opara, I know you're able to speak a little bit more towards our Detroit community here, where our Michigan students are ingrained. Kind of how have you addressed advocacy in our own community?
Thank you. So this is Dr. Opara, and so I will answer your question in three steps, or three modes. So first, I want to talk about purpose and mission. What brought me to this work? Why that's my why, so to speak. And secondly, I'll talk about origin and the power of and the role of culture and background and origin. And then thirdly, the role that education and preparation has played for me. So firstly, I believe that I'm of the belief that we're all here with a purpose. You know, we're all here with a purpose. We've been equipped, regardless of your belief system or your spiritual sort of origin or context, whether the presence or the absence thereof. For me, I do believe that we have been equipped with strengths, and there is a purpose for which we are in this world at this time, and for a reason, to meet a need, to highlight a cause, and then ultimately to make our part of wherever we are better. And so for me, I very early in life, and as I've grown older, have refined my mission statement. But I wrote a mission statement for myself, and I believe that I'm someone whose purpose can be summarized in 2 words: joy and justice. To embody joy fully and completely in every aspect of my life, and to fight for and promote and move for justice wherever that I'm located. For me, going to the second point is, where did that come from? So I told you I'm from Nigeria. Well, after colonization, or rather the freedom from colonization, independence from England in terms of my country, Nigeria, we were then plunged into a civil war, because the part of Nigeria where I'm from originally used to be called Biafra, where the Igbos resided, wanted to secede from Nigeria. Well, we lost the war, but it was one of the bloodiest and most impactful conflicts in world history, and actually is what was the origins of Médecins Sans Frontières. What you know as Doctors Without Borders was founded as a result of the Biafran Civil War. Well, the thing of the matter is, just like the United States, we haven't gone through our own truth and reconciliation process to really correct and redress harm and pay reparations for the loss that was experienced by the Igbos during that time. So there's still remnant injustices that continue and persist till today, and is embedded and codified in structures of power and government. So my parents fought in that war. My parents have always been very active. My mother is a social worker and educator, and my father is a physician and researcher. So as children, my father fought in the war, and my mother, and I correct myself, she didn't fight, but she was very active in terms of protecting her family as the first child, first daughter in her household, to keep her household and her siblings safe and help her parents. And then, of course, to survive and thrive afterwards. So this is my heritage. I grew up with this sense of that there is such a thing as injustice, and that we all have a role to play in correcting this injustice. And then superimposed upon that is, I happen to be the first child and the first daughter. And in my culture, that has a title called Ada. The Ada in Igbo culture is the first girl of the family, and she's imbued with enormous privilege, enormous responsibility, and accountability. She holds the family together. In fact, she holds the community together. They all do. We all do. So there's this sense of that, again, your role is to ensure that there's balance and equilibrium at home and in the community. And part of that is conflict resolution, leadership activities. We didn't call it leadership then, but it was totally leadership training. And part of that also is ensuring there's justice and all voices are heard and you're taking care of folks. So this is how I grew up. This is my heritage. And so how does that relate to what I do now in medicine? Well, it turns out that as I continue to grow and discover myself and refine my mission statement, starting to listen to and stay true to what are my strengths, what are the things that drive my passion, that you don't have to pay me for, you don't even have to ask me for, things that I would stay up nights working on with no request. And as I began to clue into that in college, and I'm graduate. This is my alma mater. I'm a graduate from U of M Lulu, and I changed because I was pre-med majoring in biology. I changed my major to African studies, and there was a whole process to how that came about. As I began to realize history that I never knew about, was not taught to us at home, and certainly not taught here, about the role of colonialism, the role of white supremacy, anti-Black racism, intersectionality and oppression. And it began to open my eyes as to why things were the way they were, both in the continent, in my country, and certainly here in the US as it relates to BIPOC communities, especially Black communities and throughout the African diaspora. So so what that training did, as that became my concentration, was to teach me about structures and power dynamics and how oppression works throughout all sectors of society within this context, but also globally. And that began to trigger and really create that passion for justice within me. So that is what translates into the work I do right now in terms of addressing structural racism, period, but also in medicine, particularly in race-based medicine. We recently scored a victory here at my institution around removing race-based estimated glomerular filtration rate equations, from our calculations of renal function at our institution. We're still in very preliminary phases, but we're moving forward. And my educational curricula and initiatives that I organize highlight and focus and shed light, like Dr. Montiel was talking about, on the structures that cause the disparities, not focusing the blame on the actual recipients of victims or the people experiencing the oppression themselves. So a lot of my work in terms of this of shining a light on structures and how structures play a role in oppression and in inequity is to flip the script. And I love what you did, Dr. Gloria, flipping the script and taking control of the language to say, nope, it is not that Black people or BIPOC communities, their behavior or their whatever issue that is going to be focused on them. And the big one is this, you mentioned vaccine, this mistrust of the healthcare system, mistrust. And so what I've started to reframe in my circles is, no, this is not an issue of mistrust. This is an issue of trustworthiness. The medical system and the healthcare system has proven themselves to be untrustworthy. So then this begins to drive the conversation as to focusing on the structures and the system rather than focusing on the community to fix something that is perceived as broken or deficit within them that doesn't exist. So these are some of the ways that so I would say strategies and approaches that I bring to my work. I'll pause there because I think I've taken enough time, and I'm happy to build on that in as the conversation proceeds. I'd like my colleagues to add their perspectives as well.
Thank you, Dr. Opara. No, I think you touched on a lot. And Michael here again, especially you as the oldest woman in your siblings. I am an only child myself, and I understand the pressure that brings to address things that you see injustice and the traits that your parents passed down to you. So I completely understand where you're coming from. I think the question that I want to open up and kind of the purpose behind our panel is the idea of, we have a lot of younger or at least less experienced advocates on the call that are starting their advocacy journey. And so how can different skills be used for advocacy, and how can someone become an advocate? If you guys just want to have a back and forth of what kind of insights you may have to people just starting out their journeys.
Don't feel that you need to do social media. Don't feel that you need to write newspapers. You need to find your joy with this. You heard right now from all of us that we have found, for whatever reason in our lives, a way to transmit what's actually our passion and what's actually our little point that we have in our hand or in our foot. Then you need to make sure that you're channeling that energy. You heard about war. You heard about legal status. You have heard about discrimination, color, flavors. You need to find where you are. And most importantly, there's things that you need to know. You need to know about at least basic writing. You need to know about how to, mobilize and connect. In order for an idea to be heard, it needs to have a lot of little steps. If you do not know, that's perfectly fine. That's why you have us. That's why you have us. You need to just connect. In the old days, it was like a miracle, and that was the importance of actually going to a big conference. Right now, we have this amazing things like diversity in medicine that we can connect and empower each other. And sometimes it's not recreating the wheel. The process is there. It's actually finding someone like you that has the power to do something different, to dare to break the model of the things they have been doing. And that's why I'm actually wearing this shirt. I was waiting for the final part, but that's the important thing about grit. That's where actually you come with absolutely everything for the things that you're doing. Because if you're not there, you can do it on social media, you can do it in policy, you can do it with everything. And the beautiful part is when we actually combine absolutely everything, the empowerment of your knowledge, the empowerment of your passion, and put everything together, and that's where the magic comes.
I want to build on that. Thank you so much, Dr. Shapiro. So what I would say again, starting with three questions. Number one, what is my why? And I'm building on what Dr. Shapiro said. What is my why? As you know, my story, I started with my mission statement. Do you have one? Start with why. Why is it? What do you care about? Why are you pissed off when you hear certain things? Why do you laugh out loud when you hear others? What is your why? Because that is what's going to sustain you. Because remember, advocacy and activism, change work is lifetime. It is not one day, it is not one tweet, it is not one post, it is not one article, it is not one volunteer activity. It is forever. I'm committed to, and I'm sure my colleagues on this panel are committed to doing this until they come and take us kicking and screaming to the other room to go lay down somewhere or till our last breath. So this is a lifetime of work. It is. So the first question is to be clear about your why. What gets you going? Because this is not easy work. And so when it gets hard, when the obstacles come, when the challenges come, what is going to sustain you is connecting back to that why. Why do you care about whatever it is that you are identifying? The second question is, who do I connect with? So in medicine, especially, we're taught, well, I need to go do, I need to go help, I need to go save. With this rugged individualism that has Eurocentric roots, is highly problematic. In fact, it's harmful in a lot of ways, okay? Rather, the next question, who do I connect with? Who do I collaborate with? And a hint is with people that have been doing the work much, much longer than you and know so much more about it than you. And and preferably people that are closest to the issue, whatever that might be. All right. And so that's the second thing. Who do I collaborate with? How do I build coalition? That is it. Not how do I go forth alone and be the savior, cape flapping in the wind. No. Okay. Number two. And finally, number three, how can I learn more? And when I say learn, I mean critical engagement in education, not just the acquisition of knowledge about the issue, not just learning, okay, what is structural racism? Okay, what is gender inequality? Okay, what is xenophobia and all those things? You can read the books, you can attend the webinars, you can talk to the people. But I will emphasize, Paulo Freire. I was going to list a few of my heroes and I can do that later in the chat, who really influenced me, people like Frantz Fanon, Paulo Freire, and there's a whole list of folks that when doing this work, is so critical to have them as guideposts. But he talks about the power of reflection and action. You cannot have, your action needs to be grounded and informed by critical reflection. We need to be reflective inwardly. How do we, in our conscious and unconscious, active and in passive ways, actually contribute to the problem? Otherwise, we'll move forward without that reflective piece and actually perpetuate harm or participate in the cycle of producing the inequity that we are so passionate about correcting. So in summary, three questions. What is my why? What is that mission statement? Who do I connect with? How do I build relationships, collaboration, and coalition? And finally, how do I learn more? By critically engaging with knowledge acquisition in a reflective manner that is introspective first before being externalized.
Yeah, and Michael here again. I think that's a very good groundwork. Oh, sorry, Dr. Montiel.
just very briefly, and just to add to that beautiful sentiment also is the concept of unlearning, right? Because oftentimes we think that advocacy is supposed to look a certain way, and that we're only an advocate if we have acted on this macro level, but just also know that us really unlearning what sort of some of these general kind of knowledges or ways that we're supposed to engage, and really going back to what can we do on a personal level? What are we aiming to do as an advocate? Are we trying to change someone's perspective? Are we trying to actually get an action done, or engaging in policy, engaging in conversations, actually helping community? There's so many ways to become an advocate that I think a lot of that gets lost in the general narrative. And so we need to see where we can plug in and not see it that we have to do it all, but really where are we comfortable, and going back to what Dr. Opara said, really using our own personal narrative and where we stand as a way to build. And if this is just the starting place, it's okay. We may only, be able to maybe speak or advocacy within our own families, for example, when a comment gets made that is anti-Black or anti-dark people, etc. So that's one sphere to advocate, and from there, building on our skills and building on our comfort levels as well onward.
Thank you. And Michael here again. Dr. Brown, I'd love to have you answer the question as well, but I also want to add another point to it that Dr. Opara brought up is for a lot of our young learners or advocates, identifying the population and whether they want to be helped, or how to talk to them and how to identify those community partners that may already exist, especially for people like myself that may not identify the same ways as the groups that I'm attempting to help with. I think it'd be a good thing to touch on for some of the people in our audience.
I just believe in really taking an inward journey. A lot of people skip that step where they have to learn who they are. They have to understand the critical elements that make them want to do this work, but also like who it impacts. How do you sustain yourself over time? How do you build community and have networks of support in doing that? Is there opportunities for overlap? Because as everyone said, this is a lifelong thing, and it has its real toll. It has tremendous upside, but there is gravity to it. And so you have to make sure that you have a connection to whatever you believe in or whomever you believe in before you start to really, really get in, because this can literally be one of those like breaking down, deteriorating, but also rebuilding moments. So I definitely encourage everybody at that step to take the inward journey, understand that why. And also I would say like, it takes a lot of patience and listening. You have to develop an ear. I mean, we love medicine. We love the idea of hearing patients, but truly trying to listen with a different lens and accepting whatever they say. When you're in certain spaces, and it may not be that you are the savior. It may not be that you are the hope, and seeing what your role in that space can be. And then finally, I would say the development of tools and seeing what tools you already have and repurposing those things. I used to grow up, I grew up listening to rap music, man. I love hip hop music. And I come from a family that loves music. My mom is from Detroit. My dad's from Saginaw. Like that's where I'm from. And so kind of getting that vibe made me appreciate how language was used, how to literally like tap into different people, and finding that as a vehicle created the nexus for me to communicate with a variety of different individuals who normally wouldn't open up. But when the conversation turned to health, I realized that they closed down. When it turned into situations that were community oriented, they kind of closed off. So taking my knowledge of music and creating some type of nexus between us became my vehicle. So there are things that were uncommon that I used as tools all the time. The reason why I have locks, I walk in the room, I've had locks since 2010. And it's very difficult to navigate medicine when you have long hair. It's essentially set up to like, this is an anomaly to be a brother to come through the entire process and never cut my hair. But I knew that was a part of my connection. That was a part of connection to myself, but to the people that I was really struggling to reach. And I wanted represented, and I wanted the patients to see their grandson in me. I wanted the people who I was working with to see people that were in the community in me. So those are the tools that I say that I kind of harnessed. So everybody has these tool sets, and they are a Swiss Army knife of people. So just make sure that you are aware of those things and figure out how you can use them in unconventional ways.
Michael here again. Dr. Brown, I liked how you touched on it as a lifelong commitment. I think, no
Yeah.
one wants to start the race and not finish it. There was a question in our question and answer panel that someone in the audience asked regarding the fact that because this is a lifelong commitment and we also have other things that we have to do in our lives, kids, children, families, our own employees' responsibilities, it can lead to burnout, especially amongst
Facts.
people who have to constantly explain
Facts.
themselves. And so
Facts.
how can we avoid that? What are each of you doing to address burnout, or how do you take a step back to avoid that and be able to continue along the journey long term?
And I think that and I feel the energy from Dr. Brown. We don't see this as a fight or as a thing or as an objective, or this is what we are. We're channeling. This is, if you ask me right now, yes, I work as a pediatrician, and yes, I'm the medical director for whatever, and I wear those hats. But when we have this forum, this is actually what we are. That's the internal fabric of what we are. Then the same way that when you grow up, you have growing pains. There will be growing pains, but you do not need to see it as a barrier or as a problem. It's part of the journey. The more scars that we have between the four of us that are in front of you, the more scars that we have, that means it's not that we bled and we died. No, we survived. And we didn't survive. And Dr. Opara actually said something amazingly well. We're here from the part, not from happiness. Happiness goes away, but we're coming here from the part of joy. And that's where it makes a huge difference, because we already have had a lot of barriers and we have a lot of things. The thing is, the way that you perceive it and the way that you project it, it's different. We can tell you that the four of us, I'm Mexican Jewish living in the United States. I went from Chicago to Florida and LA and Orange County. Then, unless, we have, I was giving in the middle of Florida, and I'm going to share with this, care to people that were on the extreme right in the middle of Florida. And I started with 2 patients, and they had like beautiful tattoos, remembering where it came from, like swastikas and stuff like that. And I saw them as patients, and the work that we're doing, that I'm here to make a difference. Then they can come from whatever aspect of their lives, but I'm doing this for me. First of all, yes, I'm egocentric on that part. I'm doing this for me first, to actually start being part of everything. And I'm not here to educate anybody. I think that it's not about education, it's about information. Translating medicalish to something that we can actually do and translate into action. And I think that's where I'm coming from.
I think that it's important to just know that you're tapped into the source. Like, just being in this space with you guys is re-energizing to me. And that's what I make sure that I'm doing. I'm constantly looking for, where's the plug? And that's how I navigate it, is I build a community of people who come with a certain type of energy. We use each other as those levers and pillars. And then knowing that the source is limitless, because this is good work. I never have to question that. And I see the downstream results of it daily. And then when you start to see these goals being reached, all it does is reignite you. So anytime I hear these victories, it takes all of that sense of worry away from me. It just literally reignites me. And so I don't find, when I say burnout, I'm more so talking about the management, the logistics, the actual tug of war that you have to go through with individuals. Sometimes that creates the burnout, but the burnout doesn't come from the fight. We got juice.
Right. And if I may build on that, thank you, Brother Brown. Really, I would say what Dr. Shapiro said is so key. And that's why, for me, again, I always come back to purpose, joy. This is joy. Yeah, this is a Saturday morning. I am chronically sleep deprived because I have 3 babies. I have a husband. So some people might say I have 4 babies, but you didn't hear me say that. Oh, don't let me hear. So, and right, okay, we have 3 babies. Let's do that. And I have full-time jobs. I got jobs. Okay, I'm a Black woman, physician, academic. So I have 2,500 hats just off the top. Right. So when you talk about exhaustion, sure, yes, but this is my purpose, right? This is I love how Dr. Shepard said, this is who we are. This is who we are. I love that, yes, because it is purpose driven. This is why we're here. right? So when I'm tapped into my why, I don't understand burnout. I really don't, right? But let's be realistic. Yes, you are right. They and I love what Dr. Brown said. He said the exhaustion comes from dealing with folks. That's true. You know, it is resistant folks.
Right.
And it's like dealing with Howard Buckner from JAMA for his just highly
real facts
disgusting letter of apology for JAMA's podcast talking about physicians are not, no physicians are racist. If you don't know that, someone please put the link in the chat and let the people know what's really going on. Okay, what we're dealing with.
You see, I'm rubbing my temple right now.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. In the spirit, we're all rubbing our temple, right? That is the head of one of the largest journals. This is, do you understand that policies and politics are based on science? You understand that science informs politics and policies and laws. You understand that, right? Like what we do is not a game. When we talk about structural oppression, structural racism and isms and systems of, you know, we're talking about mutually reinforcing, interlinked, interconnected systems that form the reality in which we live. And medicine and science is critical to that. We are informing these folks that sit in these halls of power, making decisions that then come back and affect us in terms of our access to, you know, housing and education and policing and criminal justice and wealth building and what resources come to what neighborhoods, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It comes from the work we do. So we cannot afford, right, to be the vehicles and channels of these reinforced producing and then reproducing and maintaining these same structural inequities, but then come together in little pods to talk about why, there are inequities, right? And so things like Howard Buckner, dealing with them folk, that's exhausting, right? But calling it out, developing the solutions and the tools, building collaboration, coalition, working with partners, that's joy, right, towards justice for me. And it sounds like for my brothers and sisters here on this panel. So I really want to lift that up. I also want to very quickly just say to your question, Michael, in terms of, and again, I think I heard one of my panelists, co-panelists here saying that, you know, we say in global health is basically built on 1,000 cups of tea. It's all about relationship building. I heard something about going into communities and asking if they need help. Dr. Gloria said this already. We need to unlearn the assumptions. We have to unlearn a lot. And a lot of it is the assumptions we bring into these spaces.
They need help.
That they need help in the first place, or that the help is you. It's
you, right?
For some reason, for some very, very strange reason, right? We need to start asking different questions. You know, how can I partner with you? How can I support you how can I remove barriers so that you can shine? You know, this is not being the voice for the voiceless. People have voice, is that they're not heard. How do you change structures and systems so that folks that are already excellent and brilliant and not deficit, but are full of assets, can actually blossom and thrive? How do you engage in those systems and disrupt them, dismantle them, undo them, deconstruct them, and then work in partnership with folks to reconstruct that which is better? These are different questions. We have to start asking different questions and then demanding from the powers that be to also reflect the same. Somebody I saw in the chat was asking about deans and leadership. Absolutely. I hope that there are sessions such as this for folks that are the Howard Buckners of our medical schools and our academic health centers and other, institutions like this, right? But it does come to us and to you all as young folks, as students. And I need you to know that you are chock full of power. I tell my students all the time at Wayne, you are not powerless, you are powerful. Students have always been at the forefront of change historically. If you know your history, which is why you need to know your history, right? Always. You are powerful and there's much that you can make happen. It's just a matter of coming together. And so the key Swahili saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So focus on relationship building, getting to know folks, Start with that. And then building coalition, collaboration, organization. Start with that. And out of that, solutions will spring forth.
I completely agree. And Michael here again. And thank you to Dr. Montiel and Dr. Shapiro for answering some of our questions in the chat. I am sorry to end this conversation a little bit earlier. Oh, actually, we've given it a couple more minutes than we promised. But thank you so much to all our panelists. I wanted to briefly have everyone look at the question and answers, because I think we had a couple questions that were regarding the idea of our learners often hopping between institutions, jobs, training locations, and how the longevity of their efforts seems diminished in the light of their own need to advance in their careers. And so I just wanted to let Dr. Montiel get in the final word regarding what she advises for our learners as they go through their path, and then maybe some final points by any of the rest of our panelists, and then we will say goodbye to you and all go to lunch.
Absolutely. Just want to echo this idea of joy as a form of resistance, right? Everyone talked about the structural oppressions, but it's in these moments of joy that we not only re-energize ourselves, but also our community. And then the other thing I'll share is find your people. Find your kindred spirits that are going to hold you up. Dr. Bettina Love actually wrote a book. It's called We Want to Do More Than Survive. And it's really about the educational journey. But in there, she talks about this idea of home place. And this idea of home place is usually those elders, especially women. It usually tends to be people of color that really ground you in what this idea of home. Some of you talked about in the questions about displacement between jobs or people, but wherever you go, I want to say, find your people, find the people that you want to uplift, find the people that uplift you, and let that carry you throughout your journey. Thank you so much to everyone.
Any final words from the other rest of our panelists before we log off?
Thank you so much for having us. And it was such a pleasure. And like my brother, Dr. Brown said, my brother, Dr. Shapiro said, my sister, Dr. Montiel said, and of course, my brother, Michael, this truly has been rewarding, reinvigorating, re-energizing. We feed off of each other. And so I hope that this is only a beginning. I hope that and look forward to continuing this relationship beyond this moment, long term. So keep me, in the loop. I put in my email and my Twitter handle. I'm on IG too, but I'm more active on Twitter. And I hope that again, this is one tea in the 1,000 cups of teas for relationships long term. Thank you. Joy and justice.
I'll just say, lean into sharp edges until they don't really have power over you anymore. Love endlessly, like deeply and abundantly. Be a servant and do it selflessly. Don't expect anything in return. Do it because you can. And then finally, come back and open the door for somebody else. That's all I
got. This is Ilan. I'm honored to be here, and it's a beautiful way to start the weekend with energy and joy. And I hope that the mission of vaccinating right now, especially our communities against fear with a dose of truth, continues to resonate in all of us. And it's an honor and a blessing to be sharing this panel with you and this time with you. And we're here to help.
Thank you so much, panelists. For all audience members, we have a small lunch break now, but we're going to come back at 12:25 to hear from Dr. Randy Vince, who's a urologic oncology fellow here at the University of Michigan. Until then, thank you so much for listening, and panelists, again, thank you so much for being involved. If through the Socio app, attendees, you are able to interact with some of our panelists, you can find their social media accounts there for those that have them, and please feel free to continue this conversation. I think it's important that we keep talking to those around us and anyone who's willing to chat with us. And for those of you who are interested in continuing some components of this conversation later, our Changemaker conversation at 1:30 will highlight some similar discussion from some other speakers. So again, thank you all, and thank you to the panelists. Have a great day, and I hope we can walk forward with fully engaged in this venue. So thank you so much.